Check. Mic check. Testing. Check, check, testing, mic check, testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2, mic check.
Okay, so that's the answer? Yes. I love watching her side. She's so like, yeah, I saw that. Yeah, because I saw her respond and I thought she was Yes. Yeah, I like it.
chuyện tình thương nhất chuyện hoa sim có người con gái sống vơi vơi tóc còn ngắn ngắn chưa đầy ngày xưa nàng vẫn yêu màu
Morning. Blessings, everyone. Greetings. Wakumi, she, her. Your curator of the Spirit and Healing Room. And we just completed a beautiful tree planting ceremony for our beloved departed, transitioned, Kathy Boudin. For those who were not able to participate in that ceremony this morning, there's still an opportunity for you to contribute to the tree planting. We are going to, how's my speed? Okay, good. We are going to have note cards out there where you can write a letter to Kathy or a memory, something like that. And there's a pot of dirt. You can take a handful and put it in the tree and participate in the planting if you would like throughout the day. So it will be out there all day. Feel free to take a reflective moment whenever you like. Thank you.
Yes, for the jams this morning, Cameron. Going for it too, you know. I didn't want to interrupt them in the middle of the bridge, but I think we have to get started. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Oh, no. You know I don't like half-hearted good mornings. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back to the 13th annual Beyond the Bars Conference, Beyond the Bars Seeding Justice. We have a wonderful morning planned for you. If you've missed that tree planting ceremony, you definitely missed the thing. But like Wakumi said, there is an opportunity to go out and take some dirt and leave a note. If Kathy was one of the first people that ever made me feel seen, that ever made me know I was a leader. And her work was so integral to sort of creating the space that we're in today. So I am filled with joy. I hope you all are filled with joy. And I cannot wait for this conversation that we have. Two of some of the most sort of transformative thinkers, I think, out there are going to be in conversation just now around addressing conflict and harm in social movements. Right? And any of us in movement spaces know that oftentimes that's the thing that starts to derail so much of our progress. So I can't wait to have this conversation. A couple of quick reminders. As much as you can, we are trying to create a safe space for everyone. So we're going to ask that you put your masks on. We do not want to be those people running around behind you telling you to pull up your damn mask and carry on. So if you could just do that work for us. I tell this to my kids. I'm like, don't make me. I don't want to be. That's not who I want to be. I don't want to be her. Like, please, help me help you. So help me help you. And put your mask on. Let's see, what else should I tell you? There are breakout sessions that are planned after for the rest of the afternoon. Sundays are days that we take the opportunity to sort of move from theory into practice, to be able to really highlight the expertise in the community. And so this is a really great day. The problem is you can't go to all of them, but choose and really sort of let it soak in. It's gonna be fantastic. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to our wonderful panelists, Shannon, Perez-Darby, and John Page.
Thank you so much. It's such a joy to be here with you all this morning. So I just want to give you a run of how this is going to go, because it's a little different than some of the panels you all have been seeing. We are going to have a short video from a comrade who's going to talk, Sonya Shah, who's going to talk about conflict a little bit. She was not able to be here with us, but she recorded something to kind of kick us off. And then for the rest of the time, John and I are going to be in conversation with each other. So a little less like we're just answering questions, and you all get to be a witness, get to be part of our conversation. And so before, we're going to start with the video, and then John and I will do some introductions about who we are, how we got in this room, and talking about conflict, everyone's favorite thing.
Hi everyone, my name is Sonya Shah. I'm coming to you from Life Comes From It and the Ahimsa Collective in this kind of crazy virtual thing to talk to you about sort of movements, conflict, and harm. And the first thing I wanted to say is actually yesterday I recorded a totally different thing, but particularly yesterday's morning's panel reminded me that I wanted to speak from the heart much more than from my head. And I think I want to first start talking about conflict and then lead a little bit into harms and kind of some of the conflicts in the movement. So I feel like with conflict, sometimes we need to kind of return to the basics, right? When we know that if there's two people in a room, we're going to have conflict at some point. So it's not really about avoiding it. It's just being able to put it into our rotation of things that are going to happen in the many seasons of our lives together. And for me, the first value in conflict is really around myself and self-reflection. It's digging deep into what's going on with me, whether I, feel irritated or triggered by somebody, or I've done something to someone else. And I think that can be like a really, really difficult space for us to commit to say, wow, I hurt somebody. I have to go through all my gamut of responses from anger and shame and like F you and all of it in order to get to a place where, I'm really asking myself kind of what's going on with me and how I want to be with the other person. So imagine that each of us in this movement actually made a commitment to self-reflection, what that would look like if we were to really start with ourselves and ask what's going on. The second thing I would say is to really recognize that conflict styles are all completely different, right? That there's a primacy in this movement and in the kind of the overwhelming way that therapy takes over is to think that everything has to get talked out, but that's not always true. I had the good fortune at one time being in India doing a restorative justice training, hosting one at the same time that there were a bunch of tribal indigenous leaders doing some of their own work, and we cross-pollinated for a while. And when I was talking with someone about this work, this one tribal young leader from Assam said, for us, whenever there's conflict in our community, in our village, we don't talk about it. We just actually have a party. We have a 3-day tea ceremony. Nobody ever talks about the conflict. And then by the end, it's resolved because we remember how to be with each other in relationship. And so there are these other ways to do things, right? There's a space to just be in relationship, to break bread, and to be in celebration. And I think oftentimes we lose that kind of creativity of ways that we can work through conflict. So there's some amount of emergence and discernment that we have to do, right? To really understand what's going on in the moment, whether we talk out one-on-one, whether we're in a group, whether we talk at all, whether we need time away from each other. And so I think there's having some imagination and commitment to also understanding each other's conflict styles would be incredible for our movement. The third thing I want to say is I think belonging is a real issue, is that a lot of times conflict in our movements come because we don't feel belonging. And so, one of the things that we've done in the Ahimsa Collective is we're lucky to steward a bunch of land in Santa Cruz where we really invite anyone in this movement space, BIPOC folks, survivors, people, formerly incarcerated folks, to come and use that space to do their own healing work, to do their justice work, to do their movement work, to do their cross-pollination work, to do their conflict work, knowing that you can be held, create community, break bread together, have belonging, and also have nature holding you as a container in that space. So what does it mean to actually see belonging as a value and an element? I want to say something now about kind of harm in our space. So the first thing, so speaking about real harm in movement space, there is a really big difference between real sexual abuse, sexual assault that happens by a movement leader, or power abuse that happens by a movement leader, and somebody who reads an email a tone of an email or a voice message in a way and calls it assault, right? They're very, very different things. And there's this way that it feels like in our movement we've kind of flattened out conflict and harm, and kind of there's this way that everything is called everything, and that's actually seems really, really detrimental. And I want to say something on the first piece, you know, because there is real abuse that happens, is that we have to do what we do. We have to do what we do in restorative and transformative justice. Is that we have to find really solid, non-punitive ways to address harm. We have to center the survivors. We have to ask for accountability. People might need time away to self-reflect and have remorse and come to kind of an understanding of what they've done, but we have to make a commitment to some sort of process with each other. And on the other piece about kind of everything being called to harm and abuse, I think we have to get really strong with each other as a movement and as people to question those things, to say, hey, you know, actually that wasn't true. To stand up for each other and really kind of make sure that we're not doing that, because it is become a very detrimental aspect of our movement. The second thing I want to speak to is like some conflict pieces that I've sort of seen between the three lineages. And I really want to draw from Cheryl Fairbanks, something I've learned from her. You know, my sister in this work is something that she kind of calls us as cousins. You know, she says Indigenous peacemaking, restorative justice, and transformative justice, calling them cousins. And kind of like, oh, you know, how you both love your cousin and also kind of want to kill them, but you also kind of love them and you kind of want to kill them, but really you actually love your cousins. And so, you know, if we can just sort of play with that and be a little playful about being cousins with each other, that ultimately that there is love there and that sometimes there can be irritation. And in that, I want to kind of name two things that I just want to put forth as, one is that, you know, our cousin, the Indigenous peacemaking cousin, I think out of all of these forms, has had kind of the least amount of resources and the least visibility, and yet a lot of us say that we draw from those values. And I think I want to really speak to our collective responsibility to resource peacemaking Indigenous folks for themselves and not for us. And resources can look like many things. It can look like visibility, collaboration, money, so many things, right? And not expect anything in return, and not even expect to be taught. And the second thing is, one of the things I've noticed quite a bit, and this is the last point I'll make, is that I see, you know, and I think many of us have seen people kind of fighting over like who said what and who's a part of, like who invented this aspect of this lineage. And while I really love and value movement elders and leaders and think lineages are really important and I want to know who said what, and there's been historical stealing of things, especially from marginalized, you know, folks of color, there is also like some space where I think we have to believe each other and believe that we are all trying to do something good and something different and doing it against the odds. I'll end with this story. A million years ago, I went to art school and I got an MFA, and I had a professor who, she had a show and she invited people who had made, she found two simultaneous pieces made in different parts of the country or different parts of the world and put them in the exhibition together. So it was kind of showing how, like, literally the exact same piece of art was made by two different people in two different parts of the world, and they look the same, and that can exist, right? So if there are great people out there with really great ideas, they might actually be coming and co-arising at the same time, and creating something beautiful. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate having a moment to share my thoughts. Thanks.
We want to thank Sonya for that beautiful start and grounding about how we think about conflict. So John and I are going to chat. The structure of our conversation is, you know, who are we? What do we see? What do we know? What do we need? What do we want? And I'm going to kick it to you first to say, you know, who are you? You don't want me to, you to go. We didn't actually talk about that part. Would you like to go first? Do you want me to go first? Okay. Well, I will start with a little like, who am I? How did I get into this room? So this is less conversational because John knows this, but so my name is Shannon Perez-Darby. I found my way to transformative justice work through a relationship that brought me to my knees, a relationship that reorganized how I thought about my life, with a person who I loved and who was not safe to be in a relationship with. And I tried everything I knew how to do to be in the right relationship with that person. When our relationship ended, we were not able to safely coexist inside the same space. We were both mixed, light-skinned Latinos and a queer community, and there was nowhere else to be except in the same community with each other. And we couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out. I could not figure out how to safely coexist with that person. And I tried everything. I tried friends at the Queer Anti-Violence org to help mediate. I tried, bringing in people. I tried talking. I tried not talking. I tried everything I knew how to do. And I couldn't figure it out. I could not figure out how to be in right relationship, safely coexist with that person. So I moved. That was my solution to that. And so the last, 17 years has been trying to answer the question, what would have been possible? What would have been possible to allow that person to have their humanity, also to support them to knock off their behavior. They definitely needed some knocking off their behavior support. And where we could have coexisted and both been safe and both been well. What could have been possible? I'm still working on it. And what brings me to this question, so that launched me on lots of things. Started my work as an anti-violence advocate with supporting queer and trans communities, queer and trans folks of color. I worked as doing direct services for 10 years inside my own community, working with other survivors, and learned a lot about how do we coexist inside small communities when violence happens. And what brings me to this conversation about conflict and harm in movement spaces is that this thing that I loved, this organization that helped raise me, fell apart. We were really horrible to each other. There was a lot of conflict, there was a lot of pain, and something I loved crumbled. An organization that I loved crumbled. And I did exactly what I had done in that relationship, which is I tried everything I knew how to do to have a different outcome. Everything I knew how to do to have that organization exist, for me to be well inside of it, for the other people to be well inside of it, and I couldn't figure it out. Ultimately, I left in a pretty painful set of circumstances, and that organization is not well, it's not healthy. Many people left with a lot of pain. And so I've spent the last 6 years trying to answer the question, what else would have been possible? One of the things that I see is that as movements, we talk a lot about external threats. We talk a lot about the state. We talk a lot about structural oppression. We talk a lot about what is crushing us outside of us. And one of the things that I see is that a lot of what is taking down our work is our inability to be in right relationship with each other. Our inability to be in conflict, our inability to move through conflict. Something hard happens, something violent happens, conflict happens, and we break apart. And there's a lot of pain. In fact, I don't know anyone doing movement work that doesn't have just deep pain in their heart about something they loved, an organization they loved, a group they loved, that broke apart, that split. Now there's 3 organizations where there used to be 1, 3 groups where there used to be 1, someone you're beefing with that you can't talk to with the other group, and that stuff is undoing us. And it's undoing us strategically, like it makes it really hard to have strategy and to move how we need to move if we can't talk to the other people who are doing this work. But it also breaks our hearts. It's actually really sad. I feel heartbroken that the people who I should be aligned with, the people who are my people, When we can't be in the right relationship, we can't be in the same room, we can't figure out how to make it work between us, how are we gonna make a world free of prisons? Like, how are we gonna make the vision of the world we have if, like, the 10 people in this group can't figure out how to be in right relationship with each other? So that's the driving question of my work now, is what would be possible, what would it take? Yeah, and I think just to say a couple things about lineage, so the anti-violence movement raised me in many ways. We've had some divergence in our values, but I have a great callback to really coming from the work of domestic and sexual violence. That is where I became politicized. I'm a queer person, I'm mixed, I'm white and Mexican, I'm femme. I am lots of things that bring me into this room with my people. I have lots of teachers who are like literally here in this space, in this room, at this conference. Yeah, and I will stop there and kick it to John. So who are you, John?
It was a lot, Shannon. Oh, it is. Hey, everybody, my name is John Page, and let me know if you can't hear me, right? I didn't think I would get nervous, but I got nervous when I picked up the mic, right? I'm like, why are you nervous? You're not gonna lie, are you? Normally, the only time I get nervous is when I'm about to tell a fib. So I promise y'all I won't fib, and I'll keep it local, personal, and immediate, I promise. So it's a trip being up here with Shannon. Shannon is part of the aristocracy of doing this work, right? And I came to this work, so I kind of talk in a circular way, y'all, so y'all gonna have to bear with me, right? So you may have to, John, can you go back to that point? I will. But yeah, I came to the work, actually, you know, I didn't like what was playing out in my life. I didn't like, because once I started doing organizing work and started learning more about systems and stuff like internalized racial oppression, which animated much of my thought life, right? And I didn't have language for it. Then I looked at the evidence, right? And the evidence is irrefutable, right? My relationships were crappy. I got to a point I couldn't pretend that what was going on inside didn't impact what my work looked like. And that was on a micro level. And then when I looked at the work, looked at the movements, the organizations I was part of, and the work that we were passionate about, I'm not sure if we were moving the needle, and it was clear why we wasn't. I stumbled on a question last summer, and this dude said, you know, the first question is not what do we have to do, it's really who do we have to become to do what we need to do. And that effed me up, right? Thinking about who I had to become for my family, for my sons. And I came to this work from being inside, right? And so I was inside, and I got exposed to recovery before I went inside, but recovery wasn't making sense to me. And I can go on a tangent on that too. It don't make sense. I think it's misnamed, right? You should call it something else. But recovery was the only thing I could hold on to, the only thing that helped me get through the bed. And I held on to it in a sort of, I gotta watch what I say here. Yeah, I gotta watch what I say. I can't just be unfiltered. But I held on to it in this just in case way, right? Well, just in case, shoot, I better have some of this as a foundation. And what I know is, left to my own devices, I'm gonna be a different dude in the world, and I needed sort of a framework, and I couldn't pretend that I could do it on my own anymore, right? Again, when I go back to what animated my thought life, when I go back to my family of origin stuff, and then I looked at how my work was playing out, like, yeah, I needed something. So asking that question, who do I need to become? Because I think when I think about the quality of the question, right, will inform a lot of things. And so I got into a situation, all these relationships, I'm gonna get a little personal. I was having all these relationships, platonic and romantic relationships, and they were wow. You know, and I said to one of my boys at the time, I hate him for it. I said, yo, man, shit, this girl needs to know I don't do drama. And he looked at me just with a fish-eye stare, and he's like, yes, you do. But it was the truth, you know, and all my relationships have been dramacidal, right? Yeah. And you know, and it didn't comport with who I thought I was, right? It didn't comport to this idea of being this good dude, you know? I had no control over it, right? That was the thing that brought me to my knees. What I do know is, for somebody like me, I have to have enough pain to get motivated to do some different things, right? And the sort of pain you can't take ibuprofen for, right? That psychic, emotional pain, right? I had to have that because it's not sexy, right? Doing internal work and it's not for the faint of heart, right? You know what I'm saying? And I think and it's not funded either. That's the other thing. I almost forgot that one. They ain't giving no funding. You can call it capacity building if you want to. Tell them you wanna examine the nature of the relationships internal to your organization. We need a grant to be better human beings. I'm doing that. I do some funding work too, and I'll be looking at that application crazy as hell. We know who we are? How are we gonna measure this? What will these deliverables look like? You feel me? So to bring it back, about what I'm seeing, I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit, Shannon. What I'm seeing is, again, it's not sexy. What I'm seeing is, it's not a matter of if, but when, right? And the fact that so much of this pastor in Seattle, he had a saying. He would say, shoots, church folk jump over the church to get to the church. Right? Somebody heard that before. You heard that, ain't you? And it messed me up when he said it. He said folk would jump over the church to get to this brick and mortar structure. Right? And we would put, what I see us putting our internal work, healing work, outside of the work. You feel me? Yes. So it's shit. I want some. What we call it? What we call it? Self-care. Ain't that a? Yes. Can I curse? I was gonna go to the next level. I'm still at that. I'm at that PG-14 level. But thinking about how we think about our work and what our work is, right? And I just know for me, if I'm not doing this work, all that other stuff does not even matter because it's not gonna come out the way I want it to come out, right? And I look at our movement work and I look at organizing work and there's something there. I have an idea, but I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I have an idea why we don't engage in that work. And, you know, it feels like it's crisis, like, shoot, we got to get so-and-so out of jail, or we got to stop the school trying to do this effed up program. We got to stop this, right? So we don't have time to inspect what we're putting in the world, right? And how we're moving in the world. And I just know, for me, there has to be some process that allows me to engage with myself, engage with you, and engage with the world in a very different way, right? Because of what I've internalized. I've internalized a mess, y'all. I don't know about y'all. I see the world. And the world is effed up, right? You know, and, you know, there are like 4 horsemen. Like, for me, mine are dishonesty. I'm gonna lie to you first about everything. And my lies look like people pleasing, right? Oh, sure, I can do it, right? A lot of dishonesty, a lot of fear, a lot of selfishness. And all this stuff is ego-driven. And my ego tells me I want to be right, I want to be liked, you know? And I'm gonna end on this one, let Shannon talk a little bit. Shannon can talk, y'all. My ego shows up in the things that I do that either deny or confirm and benefit you, right? And so I'm gonna do some stuff. I'm gonna show up in a way that I think affirms or disavows, right? So I was traveling, I'm not gonna say who I was, and there was a whole lot of colorism playing out, and I was tripping, because I had this American passport and I could flex like hell, right? Other than that, I would have been effed off, right? Because I'm a dark-skinned brother. And so my ego was all over the place. It was on fire, you know? I wanted to deny this reality that I was a dark-skinned cat, because I wasn't getting no cachet being dark, you know, and I couldn't change that. Shoot. Right, so I had to flex my passport. I talk real loud in English. Oh, he's an American. Okay. Shit, serve him quickly. And I tipped real good, you know. But yeah, y'all, that's what, I guess I'll stop there and we'll get into some stuff, Shannon.
Thank you, JP. I appreciate it. Yeah, let's give a round of applause for your brilliance. Thank you for sharing that. And, you know, John and I talked about, you know, this thing around like less preparation, more presence. And it's one of the reasons I'm so grateful to be here with my friend, where I was like, John and I do this thing where we walk around Seattle and talk. And I was like, oh, great. This is just the seated version in New York of John and I walking around and talking. So I think on this question of what do I see? What do we see? What do I see? From the anti-violence work I have done for so long, people started calling, right? So people started calling and saying, hey, I'm a survivor. You know, the person who harmed me is here in community. What should we do? And we started figuring it out together. And so I spent many, many, many years working with survivors around what's the plan? Like, how do they need care? What to do with the people who are in community with us who harmed them? And so I get a lot of calls when something hard happens. And I think, like Sonya said, I do want to make this really important distinction between violence and harm and violence and conflict. And so my grounding really is from the violence of domestic and sexual violence that is real and is just crushing us collectively. And part of the thing about domestic and sexual violence is that it perpetuates itself by being invisible. So our intolerance to look at, to turn and face, to see, to know that it has impacted every single person in this room in some way, that nobody here has not been impacted, because every one of you, if you are not a survivor yourself, of which most of us probably are, someone you love is, someone you love deeply is. And that should be urgent to us. It should be urgent that every one of us loves someone or is a person who's been deeply harmed by domestic and sexual violence. And it's not urgent because it's so painful. And in the face of that pain, we have to turn away from it. We have to make it less. It's actually intolerable to hold the fullness of that harm. And like the work of abolition calls us to do, this work around facing the harm of domestic and sexual violence calls us to expand. It calls us to grow, to hold complexity, as we heard in some of the other panels, to be able to make space together and inside of ourselves to hold contradiction, to hold the pain, and to hold it to transform it, not to hold it, just have it like fester inside of us. But what we are often doing is turning away. And that turning away is part of the patterns that set up a lot of what we see, and it's part of the perpetuation. So if we need to make the harm less, if it has to be invisible to us, then we are guaranteeing that it continues. And so a lot of the work of really understanding that, like, it is important to know what kind of violence and harm we're talking about. Like Sonya shared, when we flatten that, it actually is a disservice to what our plan is. So one of the things that started happening to me is I started getting calls about things that weren't domestic and sexual violence. And in the spirit of this, 1 million experiments vision, I was like, I don't know. I literally don't know what to do, but I hear you called 10 other people, so let's try something. Let's try. And so doing lots of experiments with folks to say, what would work? Let's figure it out. And the very first step of that is understanding the harm, understanding what it is we're talking about. Because if we are talking about organizations, about our movement groups, if we're talking about a person in leadership sexually assaulted someone, that's a really different plan than someone didn't get paid who should have gotten paid. And it all matters, but it's all different. And the impact is different, and the solution is different. And so the first thing we do is understand what happened, is to make some space to listen, make some space to hear about what's the situation. And so the very first thing I do now when I get these calls is I say, great, we're gonna need some time to get clear about what happened. And I talk to folks. I talk to folks who are impacted and tell me what's going on for you. Tell me what you need. I ask people, if you were the boss of the world, what would you make happen? What would be the solution if you could control all the conditions? And what we know is that, and what I've learned is that understanding the harm actually helps guide us to what the solution is. So we know, of the harm of domestic and sexual violence, the core harm is dehumanization. The core harm is you have a person who's trying to be a person, who's trying to do the task of personhood, which is make decisions, live our lives, move along, in line with who we want to be. And domestic and sexual violence fundamentally interrupts people's ability to be that person. It's objectifying, it's dehumanizing. Another person controlling you really fucks with your ability to be a person. And so the solution for that harm is agency, is self-determination, is if someone is a survivor of domestic and sexual violence, we make space for them to be in charge of themselves, to be in charge of what happens to their body, to have restoration of their agency. That harm dictates the solution. And when we're talking about these other kinds of harm, so one of the things is that I'm actually really afraid of conflict. And like many of us, we often move to the thing we need. I grew up in a home with a mother who is not afraid of conflict, and who I actually learn a lot from about, because she just is not afraid of it. And my sister, not afraid of conflict. My family tells this story about, my mom and my sister, I'm gonna say talking in loud tones to each other in a way that my sweet little sensitive self was like, "You're fighting, why are you always fighting?" And they were like, "Baby, we're just talking. We're literally just talking. This is not your business. Like, we are fine. We are not in conflict. This is bothering you. We are fine." And that has been an organizing principle of my life, where I'm like, they're fighting over there, I don't like it. And I've had to really double down on turning towards conflict because it freaks me out so much. So I'm not like some brilliant, intuitive understanding of conflict person. I'm someone who needs a lot of help in figuring out how to navigate conflict, because it really freaks me out. Kind of like John said, and I'll say this sort of final piece and then kick it back to you, which is, some of my organizing principles in life are things like, will people like me? Like, just a very little kid, are people gonna like me? And it's if you really want people to like you, conflict is a really scary thing. Because sometimes in conflict, people don't like you that much. Turns out if you turn away from conflict, people don't like you that much either. So the solution became obvious. And I've been sharing this thing a lot. I have a partner who I have been with for a long time, and I am so grateful to be with, because he is someone who's not afraid of conflict. And I get to have this masterclass of watching somebody who understands how to care for others well. He understands how to move towards hard things without losing himself. That he can be grounded, he doesn't have to overextend, he doesn't have to be smaller, he doesn't have to get bigger. He can just be who he is and face you and be in conflict. And it blows my mind every time. And I literally what are you doing? Literally, how do you do that? It's so confusing to me. And I will say, he does not this will maybe not be amazing to you all. Maybe you all are like this, but it blows my mind. He does not use what other people think about him as a factor in his decision-making at all. I know. Really, I'm like, you don't think about how other people are gonna think about it? He's like, no, it's not my control what other people think about me. I just do my thing. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. So I say all that to say that I come to this work because from a really humble place, and that I believe there is a there in all of us really wrestling with conflict and getting better at it and figuring out how do we be in generative conflict with each other, because I think it's actually a really essential part in unlocking how we're going to move together, and how we're going to move together with love and care, and also move together with some strategy to get some stuff done. Because I'm a Virgo and I want to get some stuff done. I want us to move. And so I call myself a pragmatist for the revolution. I care about conflict because it's very pragmatic to learn how to be in conflict with each other. So John, I'm going to kick it back over to you to say, what do you see in your work around how conflict shows up?
I think the thing with conflict, I think what's been most helpful for me is understanding and trying to remember that the conflict is in front of us and not between us, right? So especially with folk I'm doing organizing work with, Shannon, and that's hard because as you mentioned, oftentimes I'm triggered, right? I want to inspect that a little bit. Let me stop right there at triggered. Shit, everything triggers me, right? I think many of us, and I'm not clowning real triggers, right? Certain things are real triggers. But I think folk who've come to this work, something activated us, right? Something activated us. And we got an analysis. And then we're doing we're on the front lines of doing this work. And reaching across the aisle maybe supposed to trigger us, right? Supposed to get pissed off, whatever. When it's internal, when it's folk that we're working with, I think it's helpful to understand that, because it's hard to have compassion, right? When you're upset, when you're pissed off, and you think something's not went the way I thought it should go, and somebody hadn't, behaved from what I think is their highest self. It's hard for me to hold on to their humanity. But I'm gonna step back a little bit, Shannon. And in thinking about, so I grew up in a home, my father was physically abusive to my mom, to my stepmother, and he was emotionally abusive to us, right? So, grew up in a home like that. My father left when I was 8, divorced, went to my stepmother. But this stuff kept going on, right? So if I ask you all a question from inside my mom's all the way to 18, I dealt with this. What would I look like when I show up in the world at 18? Right? What am I carrying when I show up in the world? And I'm in this place now, I believe, for me, I believe it's malpractice. That's a strong word, ain't it? Damn, he said malpractice. I believe it's malpractice for me not to be doing some internal work. And we can call it healing, we can call it recovery, we can call it therapy, whatever it looks like. It's irresponsible and it's malpractice for me to be doing abolition work, liberation work, community work, and not examine and have a process to monitor how I'm showing up, right? Right? Hey, y'all, I'm from the Black church experience. Give me some back. So that's what I know. That's if and I'm speaking it, I'm keeping it personal, right? Because I'm no expert. And when I talk about a practice, when I say a process, I don't care what it is. What I'm talking about is getting in the right relationship. And some people, I may be the outlier here. Most people may be in the right relationship with themselves. Raise your hand if you think you're in the right relationship with yourself. Right. I was playing, really. People took me serious. And they want to make sure people saw that they raised their hand. They were looking around. Yeah. I am the it, right? But I think that's critical. I think it's critical. But I think it's the hardest thing. It's way more sexy and more palatable to go to a rally, right? Or to engage in a campaign. Hell, some of us, we can't sit at home by ourselves and not have Netflix on. Shoot. You know what I'm saying? That's like, dude told me one time, he called me and said, hey man, what you doing? And he knew me. He said, hey, what you doing? I said, I'm not doing nothing. Where you at? I'm at home. He said, who's there with you? I said, I'm by myself. He said, shit, if I was you, I'd get out of there. You ain't never. And again, it hurt my feelings, but it was honest.
I wonder if we could talk a little bit about what is good about conflict, right? Like, how does it serve us? How do we like it? What does it do?
It's the canary in the mine, right? Yeah. But again, I think Shannon, I think understanding that the conflict is in front of us, right? And because what I know is if the stuff that pisses me off the most is the stuff that I have in me.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna throw a couple of rocks, y'all. I didn't tell you. I should have told y'all that. I'm gonna be throwing rocks. Yeah, that's the stuff that drives me. So when I have some conflict and when I'm disturbed, right? You do something to disturb me, but I don't do it all the time. I'm not fronting. I'm not gonna sit up here in front like I got this stuff down and I go to all these. Hell no. I curse you out first in my head. I say all kinds of other stuff, but I know that's not gonna get me where I wanna go, right? And then I remember, okay, man, you're trying to be different. And I go through what I go through. But I think conflict, I think it's a beautiful opportunity to have an authentic relationship. Because when I shy away from conflict or being real, really it's just being real. I'm disturbed, right? And oftentimes, and I think I shy away from it, I hide it because I'm ashamed of it, right? But hell, I just got through telling y'all, and anybody that knows me, they kind of know how I grew up and they know what the deal is. What the hell am I hiding from, right? Why am I hiding it, right? Why do I have this shame? But I think it's a beautiful opportunity to put some equity in a relationship. You know what I'm saying? And you can, and it teaches people how to love you.
Exactly. I don't deeply trust anyone I haven't been in conflict with, because I don't know if it's safe, right? Like having the experience of saying like, hey, we hit against hard things, we did our work and we turned back towards each other. That's how I know it's okay. That's how I know it's okay to be my full self. Because like Sonya had shared, conflict is inevitable. It is unavoidable because it's the places where our differences meet. And we are different, and that's the best part. We need to be different. We need all of us being really different people to make the world we want, to make the movements we want. So we also need a lot of conflict, and we need to get really good at it and really sharp at it, because it's inevitable. If you're not having conflict, I truly believe you're not in deep relationship. You can be in a good relationship. Like, I don't have conflict with my barista, and my barista is the person I say hi to every morning. Like, that's fine. That's the right relationship for us, right? Like, I don't need to be besties with my barista. But the people who I want to move with in deep ways, to feel really seen, to feel really known, we need to have conflict, because I need to know I can mess up, because we're gonna all mess up. Like, if you're with anyone who's saying they don't mess up, you should get away from that person. Those are dangerous people who think they are doing everything right and they've never done anything wrong. So actually leaning into like, yeah, I'm gonna screw up and I'm gonna hurt people. I'm gonna be navigating the world and we're gonna have stuff. And knowing that we can move towards that stuff, we can deal with that stuff, that's actually how I can feel loved and cared for. I was really afraid of conflict, and through relationship is how I know how to practice that, and is how I know then how to scale it to my movements, scale it to my organizing space. But I learned that in relationship. And with my partner, thank God I'm partnered with someone who's not afraid of conflict and who's really good at loving people, because I probably would have blown it up without that. I probably would have just been like, this is horrible, and I would have pieced out, or I would have dropped a bomb, or I would have done something. But what I got to learn about practicing being in conflict with a person who loves me unconditionally, and the only reason I know that is because I've messed up in really serious ways in that relationship, and I was still loved. And like, there's one thing to be theoretically loved unconditionally, and there's another to fuck up royally, and to do deep harm to someone you care about, and to move through it, and to repair it, and to still be loved. And that is how I know we can rumble. Like, now we're super good at conflict. I'm really good at fighting with my partner. That I'm like, I got that. Because I know he's not leaving. I know I'm not leaving. I know we got each other. And so what used to be 2-week fights, we'd fight over like a month. Because my least favorite thing I do is a thing I call silent death. I fucking hate it. Which is, I am so mad at you, but I will not tell you. I will just stare. It'll be the loudest energy in the room. Ask me if I'm okay. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. Don't talk to me. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Shannon, you're clearly not fine. That's a lie. It's inauthentic. So I used to do this silent death thing where I'd punish everyone in the room with my silence. It was really, really loud. And I hate it. It feels bad while I do it. And so silent death means conflict take a really long time because I'm just silently punishing everyone for a long time. And I had to get really real about what was going on for me, about what it took to knock that off. And now I don't do that anymore. Or I do it very, very minimally. Like it's like 2 minutes of silent death, not like 2 weeks. And so now we fight really quick. My partner and I, honestly, I don't know if we've had a conflict that lasted more than a day. It's about 15 minutes now. Where I'm like, I'm mad, and then he's mad, and then we get through it, and like, great, well, what's the plan? I'm mad at you, you're mad at me, let's make a plan. And that's so healing. It's healing to see we actually really get to practice it. I get to practice a lot, being in conflict with him and moving through it. And that builds my skill to do it in organizations, in movement spaces, with other folks, because it gets more practice. It's a muscle, it's a skill that gets more practiced. JP, what helps you be good at conflict?
I need to go back just a little bit. So what I like folk to think about is, so I think we probably all know that our movements implode from the inside, not from what the FBI or NYPD or SPD, Seattle Police Department, or some of the forces, some of the systems, not what they do. They implode from inside. What keeps us from learning that lesson? And, I'm going to put forth that there's a little bit of arrogance there, but not us, right? And I speak in harsh tones, y'all, so I'm not throwing rocks, but I kind of regret saying irresponsible, right? Because I'm not trying to clown nobody. I do think it's, but I don't want folk to leave feeling bad, right? So I'm from Seattle, right? We got this interesting thing happening. What was your question?
What helps you be good at conflict?
Being honest, I think just really being honest and trust, right? So the interesting thing is, so I say being honest, trust, it's really being vulnerable. Because then that's when the trust comes, when I'm able to be vulnerable and I don't have expectation. So I used to weaponize I used to be vulnerable in a performative way, right? Well, if I tell on myself a little bit, maybe they'll give me some grace, or they'll give me what I want, right? And what I want is for them to bow down and capitulate and say, shit, you were right? That's what I used to, just being honest. People are laughing and shit, that's just my style, but I'm serious, yeah? I used to be vulnerable in a performing way, just because, and it was manipulative, and it was ugly as hell. It was real ugly for me to do that. But I think what helps me be good is being vulnerable, right? And not trusting this person, but trusting myself, because I betray myself a lot. If I'm talking, a lot of times I'm betraying myself. Not in this space, but I betray myself a lot. So being vulnerable, trusting, right, and then inspecting on the other side of it. What did I learn about me? That helps me good.
I wanted to talk a little bit about patterns. So one of the things in a position that I'm in is that I get to work with a lot of movement-based groups when something hard happens. And as I've been doing that for a while, I've noticed patterns. And I've started to get to the place where I can pretty quickly tell people exactly what's about to happen in a way that makes me seem psychic. I might be a little psychic, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is that we repeat the same patterns. And in some ways that's good news, right? So if we're repeating the same patterns over and over again, It means it's not just about us, right? Like, it's not just like a personal thing about just that people in that room. It's actually about the larger conditions. It's about the people. We do some pretty predictable, similar things when we're in conflict, when we're put in the similar kinds of situations. And so I actually find that comforting, because if we start to see the patterns, if you know them, if we get really familiar with them, there's a lot of information in there about how we get to move. And one of the things, so I work with a lot of queer and trans folks of color. So I will just talk about my own people. This may or may not be true for your people. Some of the patterns I see for my people is that we have gotten really good at critique as a skill. And the thing about critique is it's a really valuable tool. So if you are in a place where you do not have a lot of structural power and you don't have a lot of moves, learning how to point out the problems with the structure and with structural oppression and with folks who have power in the room, it's an important move. And we're really good. We've really built up that skill. Good job. Great. It's amazing. It's in our toolbox. It has come at the detriment of building up our other skills. And so what happens sometimes is that we don't get to be with our peers. So sometimes, especially if there's not a lot of us, and we're used to moving in spaces where we don't have peers, we're not with our people, and then you're suddenly in a movement org that's like where you're with your people, all the other queer Latinos are all together, and you're like, oh my God, there used to be 2 of us, now there's 50 of us, and here we are. We use the same tool that we've been used to using, which is this critique, to say, here's how power's working in the room, here's who has power. Power has hurt us, and so folks with power must be bad. And we use the same organizing tools we use against structural oppression with each other. And it's not the right move. It is not the right move with your peers to move like how you move with other folks. And we haven't built up the skill yet, and it can often feel really rare. So people don't feel like they have a lot of opportunity to practice. And people feel there's like a deep need, even to like a desperation, to get to be with your people. Like there can be this like, oh, like I'm finally with my people. And then when things get hard and something goes wrong, it breaks our hearts in just this like even deeper way. Because we expect them to hurt us, right? We expect the others to hurt us. And then when it's our own people, when it's the person who should like have our back, it is just truly heartbreaking. And so what I want for us is to learn some different moves. How do we move with each other in conflict that is a different move than this critique skill that we've built? And again, I'm not asking us to get rid of that skill. I'm not asking us to point out how power is moving in the room and who's got what, and writing our letters together about how we're going to move collectively to take action against a certain person, group, organization. We can keep that in our tool belt, but we're going to have to build some new skills. And that is a lot of what I see when I'm brought in, there are in organizations where people are with peers and are moving like they're moving against structural oppression, not like they're moving against their peers. And like Sonya shared, we have to have some like belief in each other, some softness, and it actually calls us to look at ourselves. I don't have like a manifesto about how we're going to solve that problem. I think we're going to solve it through practice. I do actually believe there's a value in shining the light on something, like being able to see something right-sized. I'm the child of an alcoholic, grew up in an alcoholic home. One of the things that happens for many people who grow up in alcoholic homes is that truth and reality become very confusing, right? So like what's happening, what's the story? And then what's happening behind closed doors are very different. And I am so grateful for that experience because it taught me a lot about what it is to like open up the door, to shine the light on something. Because I have a feeling inside me where I'm like, oh, what the story is and what's happening are different. Oh, it's happening again. I know this, I recognize this. And there is something about just bringing things into balance to at least be able to see what's going on. that actually is a part of the process, to be able to shine the light on and just say, hey, here is what is happening in this room right now. Even if we don't have a solution, there can be a lot to say to just like put our stuff on the table. And there can be a cost to putting our stuff on the table. It can feel really scary. But there is a first part about understanding the situation, about shining the light on it, about getting things, the reality of the situation and the story about the situation to line up. And so, yeah, so I think I just wanted to share that piece because it is the most common dynamic in these conflict and movement-based groups that I see over and over again, which is our inability to be in right relationship with our peers. To you. You want me to ask you a question? What you thinking? I wonder as we're sort of thinking in the back kind of third of our time together, really thinking about this, like, what do you want? Like, what do you want our vision to be? What's your vision of like how we're gonna all figure this out together?
That's pretty, it's a trip. So, I was oriented in this work in not necessarily having a vision of what I didn't want, right? And so much of the organizing work I've done was to dismantle some stuff. And so I'm challenged. And folk ask me, what would you like to see? And I just know what I'm against, and that seems kind of backwards, right? I think what I want is real simple. This dude named Bill Duke, he's a black filmmaker. He said if you deal with the demons on the inside, the demons on the outside take care of themselves. Yeah, and if you ask me what I want, that's, if we not externalize so much of, because we talk about it's about relationships, right? We say that OBS, right? But it really ain't. You know what I'm saying? It really, can we name that? It really ain't. We say that because as soon as we get triggered or upset, F the relationship, right? So I think if we just, I'm a Michael Jordan fan too. I know I'm in the land of the Knicks, forgive me. But, every year Jordan would work on an aspect of his game that was weak, right? And so I call it working on my left, or I'm right-handed. I'm not a hooper either. I don't play basketball. Wasn't good at basketball. But I think if we work on our left, if we examine our boxes, right, and those growing edges, and start our work there, and it's hard as hell, but I can't think of a better group of people, because we're the vanguard, y'all. We're the conscious, we're the soul of our society. And if we don't do it, who's gonna do it? That's the bottom line. If we don't do it, it's not gonna get done, because we know there's plenty of evidence that this country is not interested. And so how do we reconcile? How do we reconcile it? And what that process is like? And just to have some grace and some compassion in a real way with ourselves, and then with each other.
I was just taking that in. I think I want to tell two short stories about like how I'm moving different and what I've seen. When I had that experience where the organization that I love deeply fell apart, there was a lot of relationships inside that organization. I'd been there for 10 years. I was there from when I was 23 to 33. It was a third of my life at that point that I had been all inside this organization. And I learned some really important things when that collapsed. One was that it was not a good idea to be all in one organization. It was, we did do that like We Are Family stuff. They were not my family. Like, they weren't Part of what happened was that I had a medical crisis. I was in a car accident, and I got a brain injury. And I will tell you, they were not my family. They did not take care of me when I had a brain injury. They did not care for me. And it was a hard way to learn the lie that, we are a family. Who took care of me were my people. I was well cared for. I had what I needed. People cared well for me. It was not the nonprofit I worked for. They were not who cared for me. And that was a really hard lesson to learn, and a really powerful lesson to learn, because how I move different is that I don't overly attach myself to any organization or one space. What happens is that the relationships are what ground me, who I'm in relationship to, who I move with, really thinking much more about sort of temporary structures. I just don't know if we need to be building things that last 50, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I'm not sure that's serving us. I think we've done an experiment about that in the last 30 years, and there's been really important things. But having particularly the nonprofits be our home is not working. That is a failed experiment. But we build what we need as we need it, and then we shift when we need to shift. And so some of the ways that I'm moving differently is that, I've diversified the pillars, right? it's like I had 2 pillars holding me up. And then when those both went down, it was really, really hard. And now I have 5, 10 pillars holding me up. I move with a lot of different folks who are interrelated in different ways. It makes a lot harder to answer the question, what do you do or where do you work? I'm like, well, I do this thing and I move with these people. But there's actually not one organizational home. We move in the formations that we need to move that serve us in that time. And a lot has become possible in being deep about the relationship, but looser about the formation. And so I work with this project called Mandatory Reporting is Not Neutral. And it is my favorite project. And it's my favorite project because it's based almost entirely on relationships. So we came together, we were folks who were working the anti-violence work, who kept seeing that mandatory reporting was crushing us. It was pushing us and our people into family policing systems and into policing systems in general. And we were like, we need a different plan. And we met for 1 year with no goal, no plan. We just talked. We had food, we hung out, we talked with people, many of them I had known a decade. And now 4 years later, we have built all of these amazing things, and we keep it light, we keep it loose. We're not a nonprofit, we don't hold money. People work at organizations that hold money so we can move how we need to move. Sometimes we need money to move. And so we do that. And it is so joyful to be in relationship with each other and to organize from this place of relationship, not from a deliverable or a goal that is based on the relationship. And someday that project will end, and then those people will just still be around, because we literally are neighbors. And so that movement is giving me a lot of hope in how to move differently. The last thing I want to share about that is, in that organization that collapsed, pattern I noticed for myself about conflict, which is the worst. Oh, it's the worst. Which is that I am often in conflict with people who mirror things back to me about myself that I have not healed, that I do not like. And it is not great. It doesn't feel that great to be like, oh, that is about me. And there was a person in that organization who we just could never find our rhythm. And I did a lot of work, of my own work, about what was going on. And it was 100% because she mirrored back to me my least favorite parts of myself that I had not healed. And, this fall, I feel kind of teary about it. This fall, me and that person, we had a repair. We had 6 years inside an organization, and one of the things we got really clear about is that organization was toxic, and so it was not possible for us to be in good relationship in the positions we were in inside a toxic environment. and that it actually had nothing to do with her, like, or me. Like, some of it was like we had our own stuff, but the context was so much of a part of that. And so this, like, just, you know, and it was like every time I'd see her in a meeting, I just have that like pit in my stomach where I was like, oh God, we're just gonna roll our eyes at each other and we're gonna be snippy and we're just like, she's gonna disagree with everything I say. And we started to be in positions where it was actually get in the way of the organizing, that we were both trying to make some big moves, and we were mostly aligned. Like 90% of us were aligned. And it became really clear to me that not being a good relationship with her, or at least right relationship with her, was actually impacting how we were moving and organizing. And you know, through a series of things I won't share that are more complex to share here, she reached out and she was willing to have a conversation. And we sat down for 3 hours and we repaired that conflict. We were actually able to turn and face. I was able to say to her, hey, here's how it hurt me. Like, here's how you moved hurt me. And she was able to hear that and say the thing I always need to say. If you're ever in conflict with me, all I need to hear is, Shannon, that makes sense. That's literally, it turns out, those are the magic words. People say, oh, I see how you got there. That makes sense. I can soften, I just, you know, being understood, being seen is so much of a part of what I need. And so if someone can say, even if I don't agree with you, I see you, I see how you got there, I can work with that. And she said that, and I was able to do the same for her and say what she needed. And, you know, and now we organize together and we're like strategizing about how to get money from the city and from her position to my position to move how we need to move. And it was deeply healing to actually turn and face each other. And not only was it healing interpersonally, that like for 10 years, this relationship I could never quite figure out how to be in, like it's taken care of. And it's also taken care of because now we organize together and we don't have to organize around each other, which is we were doing a lot of organizing around each other. And so I think I just share that to say, like, I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to be in long-term relationship across these spaces so that we could move how we needed to move. All right, JP, we got about 5 minutes left. I wanna kick it over to you with this sort of like, you know, what else do you want people to know? What else, you know, as you were sitting here and again, or prepping to be here, that you wanted to speak into the room?
You know, I just want to, I don't know what folk expected, but I think it's helpful for me to talk from my own experience around this subject, right? I mean, it's, you know, I'm not an expert, you know, I've learned a lot about me through harm I've caused, things that have happened to me, the harm that I've experienced. And I think about accountability. You know, we have these buzzwords. So one of them is accountability, and it's kind of a trip, right? Because I know if somebody put a mic in my face, say, hey, John, who are you accountable to in the work you do? I name all these groups, and to the group, they don't know that I'm accountable to them. I'm telling you, they don't know. And they don't know how to hold me accountable, right? And so, again, at this micro level, what holds me accountable, I have 3 people that I had to get clear on. When I'm acting outside of my principles, when I'm in this self-protection place, really the fear place, right? These 3 people come up, right? And I know I'm not acting in my integrity. And that has some power for me. That was the only thing I think, thinking about accountability, and because I know what I've put in the world, and, you know, I moved through the stages of grief, you know, I had some shame and some anger and all this old stuff. And the way I show up and be accountable is doing my own work, right? Because I can apologize and you know, follow my sword or whatever. But if I'm not in a process to get at the essence of what was driving that behavior, right? Then it's, you know, it's going to happen again, right? The right set of circumstances. So the last thing I'll say is, again, this is going to sound cliche-ish, but put our own mask on first, right? I don't know if y'all like me, when I get some new information, I want to go to my family and want to beat them up with it and shoot. Damn it, you need to be like this, right? Or go back to work. But really, it's been a lifelong process of trying to internalize this stuff myself, right? And so I think if we can think about what, if folk can, and we have to do it. This is, it's folk, there are a lot of problems, but if we don't do this one, if we don't change how we're engaging with ourselves, with each other, and with the world, then I mean, if you just ask yourself, because I'd like to do this mindful inquiry. If I just ask myself, the way we're moving, the way this organization, or the way I'm moving as a person, is that going to get me what I want? That's a hard, and if we're honest, if we're really honest, the way I'm moving, I know what the goal is, I know what we say we want. Will this get us there? And if we're honest, and if we can grapple with that and work back, and even do some disaster forecasting, right? I'm kind of a fatalist dude. I do all this old crazy stuff, but do some disaster if I don't do it, what's gonna happen?
Thanks, John. I think the last thing I'll leave us on is that I feel great hope. Like, I heard Mimi Kim say this yesterday as well on the panel about, you know, I had these moments of deep despair where, like, I'll just, like, you know, be working so hard at something and then just, like, see people not treat each other right, and it'll get me really down that I was like, are we ever gonna figure this out? Like, are we just gonna, is it just gonna be like this? And then I'll have the next day where I'll have moments of like seeing people really move different, care for each other well, show up, be there for each other, grow, change, move, and be like, okay, it's gonna be fine. Like, everything's gonna be okay. I know I feel that the most when I organize with young people, where like every single time I organize with young people, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be fine. They got this, they got it handled. Like, actually, mostly, I'm like, let me make some copies and get you some money and get out of the way. Like, you're doing great. More and more, I'm like, uh-oh, I think my job is get money and make copies. Cool, got it. So I am deeply grateful for this conference and this space together, and to be in conversation with you, friend. This friendship with John has been such a special friendship to me that, you know, to get to be in relationship with someone where we just get to walk and talk and get to figure out, you know, how do we care well for each other, how do we move, how we have to move, and it's such a joy to get to share a little bit of that with this crew. So with that, I'll close us out, and I appreciate everyone being here today.
One more time. Shannon, John, that was wonderful. I also want to take this opportunity to thank our ASL interpreters. There was a moment where I couldn't take my eyes off of you. I was like, exactly, time to say this. This is amazing. So thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for doing what you do. I want to let you know that the next set of breakouts are going to begin in 10 minutes. They are on the C concourse level. They are on this level, and they're on the 4th floor. Information is in the program. There will also be lunch after the 1 o'clock in the concourse level. And so there's lunch there, also lunch in the community, and be back at 2 for the next set. Wear your masks, be nice, be kind, and see you soon.
Yeah, that's why I was like, right?